Fantastic. Right, I think we'll get going now. We've left it a couple of minutes for everybody. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this morning's webinar, which is all about Kickstart, which is going to be hosted by Tom Nadin. My name is Laura Hotchkiss, and I'm the event and training team leader here at the Chamber. For those of you that I'm repeating, I do apologise, but I'm just making sure everybody knows how it's going to work this morning. So we cannot see or hear you today, so it will just be a presentation that Tom will be doing, and then a short questions and answers at the end for anybody that's got any questions about the Kickstart programme. If you do want to talk to us throughout the presentation, you are welcome to do so via the chat function at the bottom, or if you're having problems hearing us or seeing the screen, again, you can use the chat function at the bottom as well. For those of you that don't know, the Chamber do a webinar library, which we have on our website. So this will be recorded today, so if you do want to watch it back at any point or want to pass it on to anybody else that you think it might be useful to, we're quite happy for you to do that as well. Tom, it's over to you.
Brilliant, thanks Laura. So good morning everybody. So I'm Tom Nadin, I'm a project manager at Staffordshire Chambers of Commerce, and this morning I'm just going to talk you through kind of what we know kind of about the Kickstart scheme and how any business, regardless of size or placement, can get involved in the Kickstart scheme. So you might have noticed kind of a couple of weeks ago that the Kickstart scheme was announced, and the government, it is a £2 billion kind of programme which provides funding to employers to create 6-month job placements for young people. So these are young people who are aged between 16 and 24, who are currently on universal credit and have been for the last 3 months, and are at risk of long-term unemployment. So that is quite an open-ended kind of, that last bit, that risk of long-term unemployment. From our talks with the Department for Works and Pensions, they have said that they are currently seeing any young person who could potentially have that risk of long-term unemployment, just due to the kind of how the current economic state is, how the current economic climate is, that there is that kind of potential risk for them. So what an employer will get through the Kickstart programme is that funding is available for 100% of the relevant national minimum wage for that young person, for that placement, for 25 hours a week, plus the associated national insurance contributions for the employer and the employer's minimum automatic auto-enrolment contributions as well. With the young people being aged 16 to 24, there is a scale on kind of what that national minimum wage is, and that is available on the Gov website, so have a look at that. What businesses will also get access to is a £1,500 per job placement grant, which will be available for setup costs, but it is mainly there for employability support and wraparound support and training for that young person. The whole idea of the Kickstart scheme is not to create long-term kind of employment opportunities from the placement, but is to develop the skills of those young people so that when they leave that placement, they can go into the job market with a lot more experience, with a lot more skills, things that they can put on their CV to help them on finding work in the future. What I will just caveat this presentation with is that following our discussion with the DWP, they have mentioned that they've launched the kind of the Kickstart scheme with kind of the minimum that they had available at the time in terms of guidance, and the guidance is coming out on a weekly basis. So they're still kind of drip feeding some of the information, and again, sometimes some parts of this could potentially change once DWP have kind of had a look at how it works from what they're currently seeing on the applications that are coming through and areas like that. So I would just kind of caveat what you kind of see today, that there is the potential that it could change, and that there is a potential that more information could come through from that. So just to kind of give you an idea of kind of how it works and kind of how businesses will apply. So there's been a lot of confusion around this. When the government first announced it, they said that Kickstart was available for people who are looking to offer 30 placements or more. Which is kind of true, but what they've also said is if you're a business who is looking to offer kind of less than 30 placements, that you can also get involved and have a Kickstart placement as well. So for any business, as this kind of graph shows, who is interested in Kickstart, if you are offering more than 30 placements, then you can apply for the Kickstart programme for those 30 placements directly through the government website, so through the Kickstart website. If you go on there, there is a way in which you kind of explains kind of the application process, and you would go through that. If you are offering less than 30 placements, then you have to apply through what is called a representative organisation. So this is an organisation that will bid on your behalf. What I'm going to touch upon today, because I think the majority of the people who are on this Zoom webinar are interested in that less than 30 placements and kind of the process for it. So I'm going to touch upon that kind of as part of this. But if anybody does want to kind of look or kind of wants to ask me any questions about more than 30 placements, then I'm happy to take those at the end as well. So if you are looking to offer less than 30 placements, then as I've mentioned, you need to apply through a representative organisation. Staffordshire Chambers of Commerce is one of those representative organisations, so we can apply on your behalf. What the representative organisation will do is capture information from you, from your business, the number of placements that you're looking for, and what type of roles you are looking to offer under the Kickstart scheme. So it's things like we've seen already, kind of people saying that they want, for example, 2 administrators to come into their business. They're looking for potential shop floor workers. They're looking for retail assistants in shops. We've had a wide range of kind of different roles that have come through initially. What we will also ask as representative is a number of just different qualifying questions around the placement, just to ensure eligibility. And I'll go through some of those kind of in a second, just so you get kind of a grasp of why we're asking those questions and the reasons that kind of that sit behind it. Once we capture all that information, then the representative organisation will then put an application in for the 30 placements plus, but this will be on behalf of a number of businesses. So to give you an example of that, we may have 15 businesses who want to offer 2 placements each. We will then put that application in on behalf of those 15 businesses because we've reached that 30 placement threshold. So that's kind of how it will work for those under 30 placements. This kind of next slide just then shows you kind of the application process that we then have to go through as a representative organisation. So these are the questions that the DWP and the government are asking us when we are putting the application in. So as you can see, the first one on the left is just checking that kind of the placements will meet the criteria of being for 6 months, at least offering that 25 hours a week, that they will at least be paying national minimum wage through PAYE, and I'll come on to more of that in a second, and that you're paying the statutory employer duties for health and safety, welfare for that young person, and national insurance contributions and pension contributions, and that you're including support for young people to get them work after they finish the Kickstart placement and scheme. So that is again about that kind of developing their employability skills so that they can find work after. These box on the right just then shows kind of the next question that we have to answer. So it just then ensures that the Kickstart scheme must be funded by the grant that you get from the project, and that it would not exist without this funding. So they are not looking to fund an existing role that you might be kind of looking to place already. They're not looking to kind of do that. You've clearly kind of got the finances if you're looking for that role to be able to go for that position. The grant must be paid, they must be paid from the grant money for that 25 hours a week. As it says there, employers can pay a higher wage and pay for more hours for that young person. But again, that is then at your own cost. The government grant will only cover that 25 hours per week at national minimum wage for that person. It must not replace any existing or planned jobs. So you can't take on a Kickstart placement if it is going to take the job off somebody else already within your organisation. You need to be careful around people who are potentially on furlough as part of that, and making sure that you're not bringing somebody in to do the job that somebody on furlough is doing, because the DWP will look at that and question kind of the reasons why behind that. Or if you're potentially making staff redundant, that you're not going to be replacing those redundant staff with a Kickstart placement as well. And again, that just kind of reinforces kind of that next point of not cause existing employees or contractors as well to lose or reduce their employment. So it's even if you reduce some of the hours of those workers because of that Kickstart placement, again, they will look at that. And we ask that question as part of kind of our process of kind of gathering the information off you. As a representative, we then have to list all the employers that we are representing and provide information such as your registered organisation name, your organisational postcode. If you are a charity, so charities, schools, public sector organisations can go for Kickstart placements as well. We have to provide a charity commission number or a company's house registration number for those businesses, which is quite simple to do. It's quite easy information that you can provide. We then have to provide what sort of roles kind of employers in our group are planning to create for the Kickstart scheme. So again, we need kind of role titles, so kind of what you're looking to do, and what we put on this as well as how many kind of those roles you are looking to offer. So we set that out for each employer, so the DWP can see kind of which employers are looking for what opportunities. Then on this next slide, the box on the left, this just asks kind of to provide information that the job placements from the organisations, all the organisations in our group, are created just for the Kickstart scheme. So we have to provide evidence that the funding kind of would not exist without, which is kind of why we ask you to just kind of clarify this on the form that we provide and to sign for that information, or to provide that information back on an email, that they will be paid by that grant money for 25 hours a week on national minimum wage. Again, that it will not replace any existing or planned vacancies, and will not cause any existing employees or contractors to lose or reduce their employment. So we do have to kind of cover in that kind of areas where potentially you have got staff on furlough and areas like that, just to kind of reinforce the message with DWP that there won't be any issues with that. And then the box on the right, what you'll see is then they do ask them what support kind of to support the long-term employability of that young person that you will provide. So this is all about that wraparound support that I've talked about, that employability skills. So how you, through your placement, will help that young person develop skills such as attendance, timekeeping, communication, team working, travelling to and from work, and how you will support them with developing their CVs and interviews, and how you will support them in looking for long-term work. And we ask that as part of kind of the form that we send out, how you are actually going to do that, so we can put as much information into our application as possible. So once we have submitted the application, it goes to a DWP panel who will then approve the application or not. So what they've told us is that they could reject certain placements, they could reject certain employers, or they could reject kind of the whole application, but they will inform us of the reasons kind of why kind of around that. So it could be, for example, that when they look at the application, it could be that we're not, a specific employer or a specific placement isn't doing enough on that employability skills and developing to those employability skills, or that they've noticed that you have kind of recruited for a similar position in the past, or you've made redundancies, that placement is then going to kind of replace. So they do some kind of checking kind of into those kind of areas. So just kind of be careful when, and kind of be aware of that when putting your kind of application in through to a representative. If approved, then the representative kind of will enter into a grant agreement on your behalf with the DWP. So the representative will act as that kind of grant holder. We have yet to see kind of what that grant agreement looks like. So this is one of the things that DWP are hopefully releasing this week, we believe. And again, that might then just provide us with a little bit more clarity on kind of what is required of a representative organisation and what will be required then for those businesses that they are kind of representing, which is why I put there that Staffordshire Chambers of Commerce will then create a grant agreement between us and the businesses that we are representing, kind of based off the grant agreement that we've got with the DWP, so both sides know what is expected of each other. So kind of we can set out that this is what we will do for you, this is kind of when you will get kind of the grants and the monies, and what is expected of you as a business who is taking on that placement and what you have to provide. Once that is then all signed off, once kind of the agreements are agreed on kind of both sides, for us and the DWP and us and the businesses, the representative will then ask each employer to provide a job description for those placements. This is when you will, as a typical job description, set out what they will be doing as part of that role. You can set out there how you want those 25 hours to be allocated kind of over the week. You can set on there if you are going to be offering more hours, if you are going to be offering a higher rate of pay than the national minimum wage. You can set all that out on that job description. What happens then is that job descriptions will then be provided to local job centres in the areas that are closest to that business and where that placement will be. The job centres then have work coaches who work with the young people who are on universal credit, and they will encourage the young people who they feel are best suited to those roles, to those placements, to apply. The young people will then apply directly to your business, so you will have to provide on that job description the best way for that young person to apply. They will not apply to, for example, us as a representative. They will come through directly to you. And what the job centre are anticipating is around kind of 5 to 10 young people who potentially could apply for each placement. You'll then be able to sift through those candidates and kind of the CVs and information that they provide, and then interview who you feel appropriate, like any normal recruitment process. So you'll take them through kind of your normal recruitment process, you'll be able to interview them, you will then choose out of those that you've interviewed who you think is the best candidate for you, for your business, for that placement. You'll then agree a start date with the successful candidate and the work coach at the DWP, and also let us know as a representative, just so we've got then an idea of when that start date will be and when that placement will start. If you have no successful applicants, or you go through the process and there's no one that you kind of think is right for it, then you can ask for more young Kickstart placements to be sent through to you. So again, kind of just making sure that you keep in constant contact with kind of the representative and the DWP through that. So once that start date has been agreed, you will then have a placement for a 6-month period. And what you'll need to do is you'll need to add that young person onto your payroll and ensure that they are paid through PAYE. DWP will then use information from HMRC to check that that young person is still employed, and the grant will be paid in arrears for that young person. And I'll come on to in a bit on how that grant is then paid. So you, as I've mentioned, you are able to offer more than 25 hours a week and pay that young person more than the national minimum wage, but again, that is at your own cost. The government Kickstart scheme will only cover that 25 hours at the national minimum wage for the age of that young person. And again, you are not, as I've mentioned at the start, you are not obliged to offer that placement full-time employment at the end of that 6 months. And you are able to then offer or take on another placement after. However, it must be a different kind of young person who's going through that placement. You can offer the same placement, the same role out as well as part of that. It doesn't have to be a different role, but it has to be a different person for that 6 months. However, support will be provided, and we'll be working with organisations like the Stoke-on-Trent Staffordshire Skills Hub to help you on kind of deciding on, do you actually kind of want to take, have you got the capacity to take that young person on full-time through full-time work, or maybe even look at then other options such as an apprenticeship, potentially part-time work, seeing if then from what they've kind of done, if that's impressed you, kind of the steps that are available to you then as a business if you wanted to take them on. So just going into the kind of the funding and how the grants worked. So as mentioned, there is a £1,500 per job placement available for setup costs. And just to kind of clarify that, if you take 2 placements, you will get £3,000 because it is £1,500 per placement. So the setup costs can include equipment, PPE uniforms, but it is, like I say, the majority of it is there to be spent on that employability support and training for that young person. So CPD sessions, CV writing, workshops, interview techniques, networking, team working. This will be paid out on the day that the placement is due to start. And if you are offering kind of the less than the 30 placements, this will be paid to you by the representative organisation to your business. So, for example, us as a chamber, as a representative organisation, because we enter that grant agreement on your behalf with DWP, any of the monies gets paid to us. When we then have approval that that young person is still employed, that they've kind of started on that day, we can then pay that £1,500 grant out to you and your business. If you agree for the representative to deliver some of the wraparound support that I've mentioned, like CV writing, interview techniques, networking and areas like that, then this can be deducted from the grant at that time. So for example, if we as an organisation put together a suite of support for you that's worth £500 on CV writing, interview techniques, and areas like that for that young person, we agree that as part of the grant agreement, we will then take that off before we kind of provide you with £1,000. There's currently no guidance on how this will be audited by the DWP, but we would advise that evidence is collected and kind of help on what the £1,500 has been spent on and how it has supported specifically that young person. We believe that what the DWP won't want to see is that everybody goes out and buys fancy new equipment and laptops that potentially that young person never actually uses in areas like that. We feel that there will potentially be some audit and some spot checks that DWP could potentially do on the business around that. So just be very careful on how that £1,500 grant is spent. Grants will also be paid from DWP to cover the cost of the placement's pay and associated national insurance contributions and employer minimum automatic enrolment and pension enrolment contributions as well. As I've mentioned, again, if offering less than 30 placements, this will also be paid out by the representative organisation to your businesses and not directly from the DWP to yourselves. So we believe, and the guidance is still up in the air on this, and kind of we're hoping that this will be clarified this week, but we believe that this business will be paid in arrears to the business. And we have initially been told that this could be at months 2, 4 and 6. However, there was some kind of discussions this week that it could, that it's not set in stone and it could be moved to months 3 and month 6. So at the end of month 6 and the end of month 3, you will get paid for that kind of previous 3 months that that young person has kind of done within your business. It's paid in arrears to the organisation. So it is important that kind of before you sign up to a Kickstart placement, that you have that sufficient cash flow, you have those sufficient cash reserves in the business to be able to cover and pay these costs until that grant is paid out. So that is just something to be aware of. And it's to be aware of, and if you take a number of places as well. So if you take 10 places, for example, that could be quite a lot of money that is going out of your business before you will receive that grant back. Auditing, so as I've mentioned, this is an area where the guidance again is kind of currently limited, but we are hoping that a lot more will come through on this. But we do believe that there will be some auditing of the placements, as I've mentioned, ensuring that that £1,500 grant is used wisely and for the development of that young person. And we recommend that evidence is kept for this and work with your representative organisation for kind of help on this and what they can kind of deliver and support on this. And again, records of training probably will have to be provided kind of on that employability side. The DWP will be keeping in contact with that young person through their kind of work coaches at kind of the local job centres, just to find out how they are getting on, ensure that they are being kind of treated correctly and fairly by the employer. All sides have the right to end a placement should they kind of not be happy. So if the business isn't happy with that kind of current placement, you can end it at any time during that 6 months. Same for the young person. If they don't think that it is a worthwhile placement for them or it's not kind of what they were expected, they can also end that placement. And if the DWP also feel that it is not right or that kind of something's not right with that placement or they're seeing things that are kind of shouldn't be happening, again, they have the right to end that placement as well. If a placement does end early, we are not kind of 100% sure yet on the impact that that could have on that £1,500 or any monies owed. However, initial conversations that we've had have seemed to suggest that the DWP will not claw back any of the funding, but will monitor what has happened. So if you, for example, you will still only though get paid for what that young person has done. So if they've done 2 months and you've decided that that placement is not right after that 2 months, the DWP will only pay you for that 2-month period. So just some kind of quick additional info. So applications, as mentioned, are now open and DWP are expecting the first placements to start in early November. So you could start to apply from the beginning of last week, I believe that it was, for the Kickstart program. What they are expecting is that it will take a month for it to go through their kind of roundtable approval process, then probably about 2 to 3 weeks for that kind of recruitment of that placement and kind of the interviews and everything to take place, and for then the first placements to start in early November. So it's probably about a 6 to 8 week window from when we put the application in. Applications are open until December 2021, with the final placements ending in June 2022. So if you sign up for the program in December 2021, you will get that 6 months worth of that program. So what I'd say there is that there's no rush. Don't feel that you've kind of got to go in, that all the money, you've got to kind of wait, all the money could potentially be spent. There's kind of no potential risk of that. And as I mentioned, the program is not specifically about job creation. It's about providing these young people with the skills and experiences they need to support their chances in finding long-term employment. But it would be fantastic to hear of those positive stories where a young person has gone into those placements and has then gone on to kind of full-time work, gone on to an apprenticeship, kind of gone on to do kind of additional work following kind of the placement that they've had with businesses. It'd be fantastic for us to be able to do some case studies around that as well. So just a little bit about us. Staffordshire Chambers of Commerce, as I've mentioned, is acting as a representative on behalf of employers across the region, and we are working closely with kind of local partners at DWP and the LEP, kind of around kind of what kind of the best form and kind of the way that to run a program like this should be. And we are submitting applications at the minute every Friday for businesses who are potentially interested. the way that our process works is that we have a Kickstarter email address, which is kickstart@staffordshirechambers.co.uk. People can register their interest there. We then send out a very short form for businesses to complete, just with some terms and conditions in there for businesses to then send back. We then use that as kind of a confirmation that you want us to act as a representative. We then will then put that in on your behalf every Friday when we kind of reach that 30+ mark of placements. We are also working with partners to create a package and catalogue of support that businesses can access, who will offer some of that wraparound employability skills development work that I've mentioned previously, and kind of how we can kind of do that to make sure that those placements are getting the best that they can out of that placement, and how we can support businesses to do that. And we are also looking to create a potential virtual network for Kickstart placements to come together, where all the Kickstart kind of young people can come together, network with each other, find out about the different employers that they're working with, and also to develop some of these employability skills through monthly CPD sessions. And again, this will then help on providing some of that evidence for employers should they be audited by DWP in the future, because we will keep records of all that, who attended, what they learned, and areas around that. And as I mentioned previously, some of this will be at a cost, but can be paid for using that £1,500 grant, which it is there to be used for. And this, as I mentioned, we can then build this into any grant agreement on the areas which you are looking to purchase that we have between you and a business. This will set out what is expected from both sides, but there is no requirement for you to use us for those services, but you can use your own kind of organisations or organisations you are linked to, but we are just there to kind of make it as simple as possible for you to deliver some of that. So as mentioned, next steps are, if you are interested in offering a placement through Kickstart programme, then you need to consider if you will be offering that 30 placements or more. If there is anybody who's on this webinar who is going to offer that 30 placements or more, then you can apply directly through the Kickstart website. It's a very similar application process to what I showed earlier that you will have to go through. If not, then you will need to find a representative organisation who will be willing to support and act on your behalf. And I believe a list of local representatives is going to be released by the DWP this Friday. However, if you would like the Chamber to act on your behalf, then as I mentioned, we have created a short form that needs to be completed and sent back, and we will send this out with these slides after this presentation as well, so you can then just apply kind of directly to us. And as I mentioned, we have also set up a kickstart@staffordshirechambers.co.uk email account, again, which you can contact us on, register interest and ask questions. So hopefully that is it. I don't know if there's been any questions, Laura. I don't know if you want to fire any at me.
Hello everyone, so now's the Q&A time, so if you do have a question for Tom, you can pop it in the chat box or you can pop it in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So all you need to do is just click on it and you should be able to type in the question that you have for Tom today. So I'm just going to start with some of the questions that we've already had in. Mary's just asked, if one employer is rejected, what are the consequences for others if this application is below 30?
So what DWP have told us is that if one employer is rejected as part of an application, they will still continue to look at the rest of the placements and employers on that application. They're not just going to say we've got to start all over again. They will see that we have managed to reach that 30 mark, and they will consider it. They will still consider those placements. So there should be no impact on if just one employer falls out.
Brilliant, fantastic. Hopefully, Mary, that's answered your question. Paul has just asked, where are you receiving your updates from? And is this on a public website like Gov.uk? After speaking to Keith Darby from the DWP, he informed me that the current plan is to repay salary costs in month 4 from work completed in 1 to 3 and month 7 and work 3 to 6. However, this is subject to change as you highlight.
Yeah, so like I've highlighted, we are still receiving a lot of guidance from DWP. We're quite lucky because we, as a British Chambers of Commerce kind of collective, they lobby on our behalf and kind of work nationally with the national DWP kind of team. So when we first had a meeting with the DWP when this was launched, they did inform us that it could potentially be months 2, 4 and 6. But Paul is right, there has been some confusion around this. and kind of there was something that came out potentially this week through local job centres that it could be at weeks, it could be at months 3 and at the end of month 6, or it could be at the end of month, it could be the beginning of month 4 and the beginning of month 7. So we are still waiting on kind of guidance on this. So this is why I'm saying you've just got to make sure that kind of however it comes out, that you have got that cash flow to be able to kind of manage that placement for that kind of period. When it is clarified, we will be going out to all of the businesses who have registered interest with us already and who register interest with us in the future, just to kind of clarify it when it comes out. But there is still a lot of kind of misinformation and drip-fed information that is coming out nationally from DWP around this.
Brilliant. So we've got quite a lot of other questions. Try and get through them all as quickly as possible. Mary's just asked again, is there a cost for using a representative?
So there is no cost to a business for using a representative, just to kind of be open and clear. As a representative, we get some funding from a DWP on each placement that we put through to help to cover our administration costs. So that helps us to kind of be able to kind of deliver and represent kind of a business kind of as a representative, but there is no cost to a business on using kind of any organisation as a representative. And if somebody is telling you that, I would kind of question that with them. As I say, you have a right to use kind of that £1,500 as you wish. It has to be used for some kind of form of employability support. So I would just kind of clarify that with some of the organisations that you're working with as well.
Brilliant. Sarah Timpson's just asked, we are a small business, can you just have one placement?
Yeah, so as I mentioned at the start, if you are looking to offer under 30 placements, if you're looking to offer 1, 5, 10, 20, 25, then you can, but you have to go through a representative organisation who will bid on your behalf and will bid on behalf of a number of businesses. As I've mentioned, Staffordshire Chambers is working as one of those representative organisations. So just drop an email to the Kickstart inbox and we'll be able to support.
Billy's just said, how regularly do you anticipate that you will meet 30 placements for submission due to the need to create a bespoke role? We may only be able to offer a small number of positions.
So to give you a bit of an insight, we put our first application in last week for 80 placements. We're probably going to put a similar application in this week. We feel that probably for the next kind of 2 months that we will probably not struggle each week to be able to put that 30 number of placements through. As it gets kind of further on, it will potentially kind of tail off, and then we have raised that with DWP as a potential issue. What we are looking at though at that stage is, as I've mentioned, we do work as a collective chamber network, and there are potentially other organisations as well that will work as representatives, and there are other chambers that will work with representatives, and we will just then see how we can potentially pool any placements that we've got to kind of work together so that they go in on behalf of that 30, so that businesses aren't waiting too long for that application to go forward.
Brilliant. Jonathan's just asked, will employers be able to send applicants to the job centre for review?
So if you know that you've got that you're aware of a young person who is on universal credit and has been for the last 3 months and fits that 16 to 24 age range, and you have a position which they could potentially be interested in, it is worth you just mentioning to them to ask at their local job centre of their work coach about the Kickstarter placements that are available. What we've been told is then there is no issue as long as that young person fits that placement criteria, that they could then apply for that role, but they have to fit that criteria of being a 16 to 24-year-old on universal credit and have been for the last 3 months.
Brilliant. Sadler Training's just asked, do they have to be office-based or can they work from home?
So the DWP have told us that they are obviously aware that kind of with kind of the lockdown and kind of any further potential restrictions, that there will be some placements that will have to work from home, and they are completely fine with that. They understand that. You will just have to make sure that you do everything kind of in your power to kind of make sure that they are as settled and kind of ready to work in that placement as you would any other employee who would probably be joining you kind of during this difficult time. You just need to make sure that you've got everything in place for them to be able to work from home effectively.
Brilliant. Sorry, we are getting a lot of questions in, so just bear with me while I try and get through as many as I possibly can for you. So Yvonne Banks has just said, thanks, Tom. Initially, the session indicated that this was meant as a short-term measure, not necessarily long-term employment, but later you clarified that it could be used to ascertain the suitability of graduating into full apprenticeships. Is this correct?
Yeah, so from what the DWP guidance says, and it mentions this as well on their website, that you can use this as a kind of try before you buy kind of scenario. So you can see kind of what that young person's like over that 6-month period. At any point during that 6-month placement period, you can offer that young person a full-time contract. You could move them on to an apprenticeship if you think that that was the right opportunity for them. And as I've said, we can kind of support you. Our partners can help and support you on them finding out what the best opportunity is for you and that young person if you wanted to take them on as a long-term kind of job opportunity following the placement or during the placement.
Brilliant. Another question from Matt. Are we allowed to use part of the £1,500 to support their transport needs?
So yes, you can use some of the £1,500 to support their transport needs, and this is something that has been raised by quite a lot of moorland-based businesses because they realise that kind of the transport links and kind of being able to get to those, and with people being in that kind of 16 to 18 age range. So you can use it to help to pay for things like bus passes and areas like that. You just need to keep evidence. I would just say just keep evidence that that's what you have used it for. What I would also recommend on that is asking that young person to speak to their local job centre, because there are opportunities which they could kind of access through the job centre, which will help on them being able to kind of get travel to work. There is kind of some funding that the job centres can provide as well. So just ask the person to speak to their work coach.
Brilliant. Nicholas just asked, sorry, can you clarify how long they need to have been on universal credit?
From what we've been told, they need to be on universal credit for at least 3 months.
Okay, fantastic. And what is the time? Paul just said, what is the time frame? I'll get my words out in a minute, sorry. What is the time frame for your application to be approved, rejected with requests for further questions by the DWP panel?
Like I've mentioned, they're expecting that we will hear back within a month. They are trying to make that as quick as possible. I'd imagine there is quite a backlog at the minute that they will have to go through, but they have set that month for them to come back to us. We then believe if they ask for any further questions, that those applications that have been asked for further questions will be prioritised, but they haven't given us any time scale kind of on that. What will be quite interesting is, like I say, we've put our first application in, and we haven't heard of anybody yet nationally who's kind of heard back that they've been kind of approved. So we're waiting to just see, kind of learn off each other on kind of what the process is, how much they are diving into that information, and then that will help us on further information and clarification that we need to capture for future placements.
Brilliant. Billy's just asked, is there information available for roles likely to be funded in education?
There isn't any further information on kind of what roles could be funded. What I would say is just kind of, if you have got a specific role that you're looking for, or you've kind of got a role in mind, then just kind of include it kind of on an application and kind of see then kind of what comes back really. There is no guidance, and from what we've heard from DWP, they are willing to kind of look at all kind of types of roles, all kind of types of kind of experiences for young people to develop those kind of employability skills and experience for a CV.
Brilliant. Karen's just asked if, as a company, we are thinking of a number of placements which are across the country, would we be able to go through yourselves as a representative, or do we need to find a representative within those other areas?
You can go through one representative for multiple kind of sites across the UK. That does make it kind of a lot easier. What I would say is it's best to go through wherever your head office site is, kind of a representative in that kind of location. And I say that just because kind of all the payments will have to be made to that one kind of office, that one kind of organisation. So if it's the head office which deals with all that kind of finance side, then it's probably best for it to be that one. But what we get asked as part of the application, which I didn't show, is which regions that those placements are in. So West Midlands, East Midlands, areas like that. So as long as we capture some of that, then we can put it onto the application.
Brilliant, fantastic. So we've got quite a lot of questions left, so I'm just going to keep going through these. Melissa, do the placements have to start within a certain time frame, i.e. all the 30 start within a set period of time?
No, so once they get approved, then it is just really, so once you put your application in with us, which you can do, as I mentioned, all the way up to December 2021, they don't all have to start at the same time, those 30 placements that get put through. What they can do is, it all depends on kind of what your recruitment process is like. Some recruitment processes will take longer than others. You might not find suitable candidates, so you haven't got to wait for those other 30 placements before kind of your placement will start. It will start whenever kind of it is best or when you find the right candidate.
Brilliant. So Chris has just asked, if in the event a placement is rejected for a business for a given reason, can the business reapply with the same applicant after the reason has been addressed?
Yeah, so the hope is that if they come back and reject it, that we will be able to kind of go back to DWP to say, well, actually, that might not be the case from what they kind of suggested. It might be that the business needs to do some potential work. So again, we could then kind of work with you as a representative organisation to kind of put in place things that you might need to put in place for that kind of placement before you then go into the next kind of raft of applications. But there will be some kind of back and forth initially between us and DWP, kind of when we kind of hear back on why a placement potentially has been rejected. Just to kind of highlight on that, and like I say, everything is open to change at the minute with this program, but the DWP did initially tell us that they don't think there will be that many placements, that many opportunities that are rejected, but they are using, they have put it as there is the potential. So that could potentially change when they see kind of what the quality is like of applications that they are currently getting. So guidance could potentially change around that.
Brilliant, fantastic. Paul's just asked, when will the Chamber make their first batch of applications? I think we touched on this earlier.
Yeah, so we made our first batch of applications last Friday for the ones over the preceding 2-week period who'd registered interest. We are now putting our next application in tomorrow, and we will be, as I've mentioned, every Friday kind of moving forward.
Brilliant, fantastic. Paul's just asked again, how will we know that our request was included in the application?
So what we are doing is then, after the application has gone in, we are then dropping an email to all those who have gone in as part of that application with the contact details that they've provided as part of the form, say that we have submitted the application on their behalf. Just that there's a kind of an audit date for both organisations and when it's going to.
Brilliant, fantastic. Can you request, Haley says, can you request graduates with specific interests, i.e. marketing?
You could include it as part of your job description of kind of what previous experience you are looking at. There is potentially a lot of graduates who could be on universal credit in the last 3 months just because of the way that the current job market is. So they will be entitled to kind of go through the Kickstart placements. What I would say is then you would potentially then limit the number of applicants that you will get. So if there is no kind of applicants that kind of meet that need, it is obviously based on kind of demand and supply. So you might struggle on finding that kind of candidate that you want, but I would say just kind of include it, and then you may be able to then kind of tweak it if you don't get kind of what you want back. So say, for example, you get a lot of applications, none of them are right, you could then tweak your job description, maybe kind of lessen it a bit kind of on the kind of the requirements for a graduate, and then send it back to the job centre for them to then send that again to their kind of group of young people.
Brilliant, fantastic. Paul just asked one more question, and the commitment is for a minimum of 6 months. However, what happens if the candidate just isn't right for the role? Can there be a replacement within the 6-month period?
Yeah, so if the candidate's not right, as I've mentioned, you can kind of, either sides can kind of cancel it at any time, stop that placement, and then you can go out for a new placement to replace that kind of one that you've kind of discarded, kind of in a sense. What we've been told as well is that that would then start potentially as a new 6-month placement, but the DWP will be looking at that and how many times that you do that, because they don't want some they don't want it to be to the detriment of that young person. They don't want kind of businesses kind of getting through kind of 2 months, then just kind of getting somebody else in, getting rid of them after 2 months, then getting somebody else in. They will look at that unfavourably and then probably won't then approve any further placements to you as an organisation or any future applications that you might make.
Brilliant. We've come to the end of sort of the Q&As and the questions that I had in the Q&A and the chat function at the moment. Has anybody else got any more questions? I know that 2 of you have popped your hand up just in the participants. So Jonathan and Matt, do you want me to allow you to talk? Do you have a live question that you want to ask Tom? If you do, just put a quick, oh no, their hands have gone down, which is, okay, very good. No, my mistake, no, they don't. That's fine. Perfect. Has anybody else got any more questions before we leave today for Tom? I know that we've gone through quite a lot today. Like I said at the beginning, there is going to be a recording of this. So if you did or want to go over any of the points that Tom's raised, and like I said, you can look at the recording. And again, as Tom said, there is a email set up for you to just remind us. Do you want to just pop the email in the chat for me, Tom? Oh, you've popped it on there. Brilliant. Fantastic. Just want to check if there's any more questions. Just one more question, Tom, just so you've got it there. So the last question is, if the first application goes well, can we submit another applicant for an additional person to join us?
Yep, so if you find out that you really like the Kickstart placement and you've had one and maybe you want to then put another one in for kind of 2 or 3 placements, then there is no issue with that. There's no kind of set limit at the minute on kind of Kickstart placements. So we've had some organisations who put in for 1, some we've put in for 10. And I think it will just be a case of we will get quite a lot more once they see kind of the positive work that these young people are doing.
Brilliant. Great. Karen, I just noticed that you just said you missed the first 5 minutes. Like I said, we will be, and there will be a recording of this on our webinar library. Probably not today, but probably first thing Monday morning. But we can email out the slides as well, should you want to just see the slides on the way. Brilliant. Fantastic. And I think that's it. I don't think we've got any more questions. Tom, thank you ever so much for doing that today. I'm sure it was very useful to the people that were joining us today. And everybody else, thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you very, very soon.
Thank you.